plan risk responses. So what we have done till now is that we made a list of risk. We have ordered them on the basis of impact and likelihood and the urgency for the given project. Now we need to respond to those risks. So our risk register, which is a primary input for this process, is an ordered list. We can think like that. And the risks which are of high rank are the one which need to be responded to. For the risks which are not that high in ranking, we may just leave in a watch list. So they are the ones we are not doing anything for that. We are just documenting it and subsequently we will review them. So risk register becomes a primary input for plan risk responses process, a first input. And how are we going to respond to a risk? What kind of strategies are available in this particular project? What threshold you should use in order to identify a watch list and a risk to respond? All these things are documented in risk management plan. So remember, if you are a big project manager and multiple people are doing risk response thing, so you control their responses or their way of doing things by telling them approach and how, which you communicate via risk management plan. So now we spoke about two categories of risk or two types of risk, a positive risk and a negative risk. So we need to respond differently for positive risk and negative risk. So if we talk about tools and techniques, we have a strategies for negative risks or threats. We have a strategies for positive risk or opportunity. So let us look at response here. And we can say a strategy for positive or for negative risk, and we can look at strategy for positive risks. The positive risks can be treated as opportunity and negative risk can be also treated as threats. Now, the first thing which we can think of doing is avoiding it. Now, you pick a feature in your scope and you find a particular feature or a specification has a problem. If you implement that feature in your product, that could be a risky implementation for a future support and maintenance. So you can decide if the feature is not that valuable. If the customer is not expecting that must-have feature in that particular product, you may decide it to remove that feature. Now, avoid is a strategy where we try to remove the source of the risk. We try to avoid risk 100%. Either we change our approach or we remove the scope which is generating a risk. So avoid strategy, remove it 100%. The risks which cannot be avoided, we may try to use another response. Here we are talking about negative risk. So the another possible response for a negative risk could be mitigate. Now, while mitigating, we try to reduce the likelihood of the risk or the impact of the risk. Mitigate is a step, a proactive steps which we take in order to reduce the exposure of a risk or a ranking of a risk. And how do we reduce it? By either bringing down the probability or a likelihood or the impact which it makes on a project. For example, if you have a risk of a particular vendor, so you are talking about that this vendor may not deliver the given deliverable on date, and this can impact your end timeline. Now this is a risk. You may pick a mitigation strategy, like you may put a penalty clause in a contract with that particular vendor to ensure that he delivers a particular delivery on a given date. Or you may assign, or you may increase the frequency of review and monitoring of a vendor related procurement work. So these kind of mitigation steps you take, and by taking those steps you try to reduce the probability of delaying that particular deliverable. Mitigate strategy. The third strategy which is possible is transfer. Now in a transfer, you try to bring someone else to take care of impact of the risk. But transfer, for applying transfer, you need to pay some premium. You need to pay some money so that somebody else can take the responsibility of managing that area. Insurance is an ideal example of transfer. So when we buy a health cover, we pay the premium and we try to put or transfer the high expense risk which may occur if we fell sick. So we are transferring that risk to the insurer by way of paying the premium. In our project case also, we can take insurance. We can also outsource a part of the work which we find difficult to manage. So we may bring someone else with a stringent scope control and delivery control to take care of that part. Fourth possible thing is accept. Now, which strategy to apply here? It depends upon where the risk rank is. Now, for some risks, you may think of just accepting them. Now, acceptance can be done in a two-way, a passive acceptance and an active acceptance. The passive acceptance, you are doing nothing, you just documenting it, and you believe that team will not get much impacted about it, so just leave it there. Active acceptance, for the given risk, we try to bring or plan some contingencies. So contingencies is a reserve or an activity which you will execute only when, if this risk occur. So you may plan some buffer of time, some buffer of cost in order to take care of that risk. Now, while we were talking about all these risk responses, can we remove the risk altogether from a risk register? Maybe not. Only in the case of avoid, we can think that that risk is no more relevant because we are not taking that function or a feature in our product anymore. But in all the other cases, it may still remain in your risk register, and we use the term called residual risk. Now, residual risk is something like you did everything possible to manage, mitigate that particular risk, but yeah, there is still a probability of happening it. Now it is less, but so it remains as a residual in your risk register. Let's look at the positive risks. So first equivalent of avoid in case of positive risk is exploit. Now, when we were discussing negative risk strategy, we were trying to avoid the situation or reducing the probability of that event happening. When we are thinking of a positive risk or an opportunities, we are trying to make that possible. We want that event to happen. So our focus is increase the probability and increase the impact by way of maximizing the impact in terms of cost, saving or a time saving. So here the approach is increase the probability of event. So when we say exploit is an equivalent of avoid in a different sense. Exploit is something, make sure you get this risk. You get this opportunity in your project. So the first strategy is exploit. make this happen. Do something so this opportunity becomes reality. First response. If you cannot make it reality, try to do something which increases the probability or the outcome impact of this risk, which is called enhance. Enhance the probability of happening it, enhance the impact. Now, take an example. You are working on a particular component and you identify that some other team is also developing similar component, and you think that if you take an output from that particular component, it can save a good amount of cost and time for your project. So this is an opportunity. If you can use that component, it can impact you positively. The first thing is that you talk to your project manager, or a project manager talks to the stakeholders and make sure that this component get removed from your scope altogether, and that team becomes responsible for delivering you this component on time. If you can achieve it, you have exploited the opportunity. You made the case, you explained to the management that this is something should be delivered by them to you and you should use it and move forward. Exploit. Now, if that doesn't work, then you may try to influence the development of that particular component sooner than you have planned the development. You try to make some possible changes in the stakeholder management so that you can enhance the possibility of developing that component well early in the project. So that is the enhanced strategy. The third strategy is share. Now, if you realize that enhance is also not working and you could not exploit this opportunity alone, you think, okay, let us share the opportunity. You talk to that particular project team manager and tell him, what if I also provide or contribute some people for developing this component, let us develop it together and use it. So if the 5 people are working for that particular component, you may contribute, you as a project manager may contribute 2 people from your team, and both of all 7 people work and try to bring that component into reality so you can exploit the opportunity by that way. So here, since you cannot win alone, share it. If you can win, win it. Exploit is that I win it. And hence, I will try to increase the possibility of winning. Share, I accept I cannot win alone. Let us have a partnership and win together. The fourth strategy, which is equivalent to our negative strategy, is accept. In this case, you are not doing anything positive, any proactive things to make these things reality. You are just noting it down and keeping watch on it that if this happens, we will use it. So in all these cases, excluding exploit, this will also generate in some residual risk, because these risks need to be monitored. You may have taken some steps, but they are not yet reality. Probability is not 1 or 0 even after doing all these steps. Once it becomes 1 or 0, then only it goes away from our risk tracking. Now, what do? We have done as strategies for negative risk, we have applied as strategies for positive risk. Now we also need to apply a contingent response strategy. Why do we need it? Because we have a residual risk. We have some watch list risk. We have, while planning an active accept strategy, we thought of some contingency. So the another tool and technique which is used here is contingent response strategy. So this is the third tool and technique, which is contingent response strategy. Now, we had a strategies for negative risk, strategies for positive risk, strategies, then contingent response strategy. A strategy which we need to handle for the residual risks. We may put amount of money and time along with the activities or at a control account or at the WBS level to take care of all these risky things. This may get into our project baselines via way of getting into a contingency reserve and become a part of our baselines. And while doing all this, we need to put our mind. And if we are putting our mind, we are applying expert judgment. So fourth tool and technique for this particular process is expert judgment. Now, we did all this, what do we get out of it? Many things. We need to update two parts. One is project management plan and another is project document. In a project document, primary risk register. So let's look at a project management plan. Now, when we were doing all this, it may happen that our approach for managing time, cost, quality, human resource, procurement get changed on the basis of all this analysis. And if that gets changed, we need to change our schedule management plan, our cost management plan, our quality management plan. Now approach is like, if this is a risk, let us try to control the schedule from a daily level. So schedule management plan will get changed because initially we have thought of doing schedule management at a weekly level. If this will happen, let us put some more control mechanism for our cost, change the precision level, change the accuracy level for our cost estimates. Cost management plan will get changed. Quality management plan may get changed because we may recommend that some more tools or some more matrices needs to be collected while executing project. So if we recommend that, quality management plan may change. Human resource plan may get changed. HRMS plan I am mentioning, so human resource management plan may get changed because you may want to replace few people from here and there. You may want to recommend a different skills for a different set of activities. So that may change the human resource plan. We may also change procurement plan. Procurement management plan may get changed because while you're doing a transfer analysis, you may end up deciding buying few things rather than making them. And if you are making those buying and make or buy decisions, or if you are triggering to analysis of make or buy decisions, that will change a procurement management plan. So this set of subsidiary plans of PMP may get changed. And baselines not limited to our scope, time and cost also gets changed. Why? Why do we need to change baselines? Now, when you were thinking of all these actions finally get converted into a schedule activities. You need to estimate activity, people, cost for all these actions which you are planning to take. If you are recommending to have a mitigation by way of conducting weekly status meeting for that particular vendor, this all need to be planned in your schedule. So by that way, all these baselines get changed. And in order to change that, you may generate a change request. Yes, this process can generate change request, though as an output change request is not mentioned, but in PMBOK also, inside the project document update, it has mentioned that this process can generate change requests, and it is natural because we may want to change some of the schedule activities and all these baselines. If the baselines are changing or recommended for the changing, it has to go through integrated change control. Now once we are done with PMP, we need to look at risk register, and the project documents update is, I would like to talk more about risk register update. Now in a risk register, we may need to put the outcome of all this process. Like we try to mention which strategy we are taking, which response strategy we are taking, what is the mitigation plan, if we are taking the mitigation strategy, what is the contingency plan, or a contingency activities we are thinking for this. Who owns this risk? We need to assign a risk owner. We also need to assign the responsibility of executing risk response plans. Be it mitigation plan, be it a transfer activity, we need to assign someone. We also need to identify risk trigger. Now, risk trigger is an event or a symptom which tells us that risk is imminent, risk is about to occur. So we need to know risk trigger for all of the residual risks, because once we see it, we will apply the contingency plan. We may also need to talk about fallback plan. So this all we write in a risk register against the risk. So fallback plan is a plan B. If your response strategy does not work, what will you do? Where you will go back. So plan B is a fallback plan. You may also have a secondary risk. So you may write a secondary risk against the risk register. So what is secondary risk? A risk generated out of executing the risk response plan. So for managing the vendor, you applied stringent penalty clause in the contract. In response to that, now the vendor is too much worried about implementing stringent change control. So whenever you ask anything beyond mentioned in a contract scope, he always says no to it. He says that I have to deliver it on this particular date, so I don't want to talk anything about scope anymore. So it's a secondary risk because you executed the response plan by putting a penalty. Now there is another risk which has generated because of that response plan. So you may also need to mention the secondary risks. So there could be many more fields like this which may talk about the various characteristics or attributes which we identify while doing plan risk response process, and this we document in the form of risk register update. We may also update other documents like log of assumptions. We may also generate a change request as an output or as an update to as an output of this particular process. So in general, this is the process which tells us, and by this process a project manager tells or communicates to the team what do we have to do for these identified risks. Risk management or identification of a risk has no use till the time we have some plan in place for responding to it. And this process talks about, think about responding to the risk.